So are we in a meeting yet? Hello, I heard that.
Hey guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so I'm looking to see if people on the phone can hear me.
Yeah, this is Dwayne Mitchell. I can hear you.
Perfect, thanks.
This is Dwayne Mitchell. Did you hear me?
It's not that.
Yeah. I should name it twice now.
All right, guys. So this is Liz Ulrich. I am the Air Quality Bureau. I've got a little stuff here. Air Quality Bureau Analysis and Planning Section Supervisor. And we'll go ahead and get this CAAAC meeting started. If you guys on the phone can't hear us, just you can either, well, you can't tell us, but you can go ahead and send a message on Skype and we can see that. But one thing, we are recording this meeting in the room, and that we'll post it on our website, so if you guys want to see it later, you can. And also on our website are the slides for this presentation. Let's see. And this is just kind of what we're going to run down today. So if you guys have, we want this definitely to be a dialogue. You guys, some of you have driven a long way, some came a block or two. So just feel free to chime in. This is definitely a conversation. We really appreciate your input. So feel free to dialogue with us, especially other people. So not me. All right. And so let's just go around the room first and we'll do introductions. And yeah, you need to turn on your mic.
So everyone can hear you. Hi, I'm Hobie Rash. I'm the supervisor here at DQ for field services.
Hi, I'm Troy Burrows. I'm in the Air Quality Bureau in the permitting section.
Hello everyone, this is David Klemp. I'm the Air Quality Bureau Chief.
Hi, I'm Julie Merkel.
I'm Julie Merkel, permitting section supervisor.
Hey everyone. It's Ali Bat with ExxonMobil Billings Refinery.
Joe Lero, ExxonMobil Billings Refinery.
Debbie Skibisky, Bison Engineering.
Hal Robbins, Bison Engineering.
Alan Olson, Montana Petroleum Association.
Dwayne Mitchell, Richland County Commissioner.
Craig Anderson, Air Quality Bureau.
Greg Gannon, GCC.
Alexander, Air Quality Bureau.
Water Environmental Technologies.
Doug Kinsley, Air Quality Bureau.
Wayne McCatt, DHS Refinery.
Go ahead on the phone.
At Orlich, CHS.
Who is that? Oh, hi, Pat.
Hi.
Is there anybody else on the phone?
Oh, John Rolich and Jenna Fisher, Butte Silver Bowl.
Hey, guys.
Steve Torpy,
Gallagher,
Philip
EPA.
Jocelyn Dobrainer.
Two folks from EPA, Jaslyn and Bob.
Yes. Hi, this is Jocelyn with EPA in Denver.
Okay, anybody else?
Steve Torpy with Philip 66.
This is Abby Krebsbach with MDU. It may have announced me, but I'm here.
Thanks, Abby. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Our first presenter, oh, actually, you know what? We have two new people in our Air Quality Bureau that we would like to just recognize. You guys will probably, well, maybe not you guys, but they will be out in the public a lot. One is Katie Alexander. She's our new air quality meteorologist. She started mid-October, and it's been really awesome having her here. So I'm sure you'll see her on some of our press releases, et cetera, that go out. So, and if you do any burning at home, you'll have to talk to her. So. And our second person is Troy Burrows, and he is our new portable registration coordinator. So we've talked about that portable registration program a couple of times here at CAAAC, and now it's in our rules, and we have somebody here to help implement it. So I want to welcome Troy. And our first presenter is going to be Dave Klemp. I don't know.
All right. I'll try the microphone here. If I end up getting some feedback, I'll move to a different mic. And we've got some IT assistants here too, so they can help us through this. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for traveling, and thank you for dialing in for those on the phone. This is our Christmas Clean Air Act Advisory Committee meeting, and as with any Christmas season, we have a lot of gifts that we'll just keep giving every year. But no, in all seriousness, we wanted to start off this presentation, or excuse me, this meeting with just an indication as to where we may be going this next year with our fees. We try as much as we can to get out information as quickly as possible for planning purposes. Give some insight as to where we think, and I want to emphasize it's where we think we might be headed, because a lot of it depends on the information that many of you have yet to provide to us in the form of emission inventories. But we do know some things that I'll go through almost for sure. All right. So where we're headed this year from a fee perspective, I want to let you know that we're not targeting additional revenues. That doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be a fee increase. Sometimes we need to increase fees to collect the same amount of revenue, right? And so those folks who are familiar with this know that we collect our air quality fees from a variety of sources. We also undertake an effort to ensure that we're operating as efficiently as possible, and that whatever fee structure we have a certain amount of equity. That is, we don't have certain facilities or individuals unnecessarily or inappropriately subsidizing other areas. That in essence, the programs we run are sustainable and funded by those facilities that we regulate. So the first area that I'll talk about is the oil and gas registration fees. And as many of you may know, that's a flat fee. I think it's roughly $850 per registration, if I'm not mistaken. It's either $850 or $825. That program right now, and from our accounting of that program, we collect adequate revenue to support the Bureau's activities in regulating those entities. So at this point, I want to underscore at this point, we're not anticipating seeking a fee increase from the oil and gas registration facilities. The other area that we collect a substantial portion of our fees from, that is the stationary permitted facilities, and those facilities are assessed an administrative fee, and then on top of that there is a per ton fee. That per ton fee is charged for both major and for minor sources, and that is intended to cover the activities the Bureau undertakes in regulating those permitted stationary sources. That is an area that I would anticipate some sort of fee increase. So I want to put that on the radar now. I'm not thinking at this point in time with the information I have that it would be a significant fee increase like we saw a couple years ago where we raised it $6 or $7 per ton. But depending upon the emission inventory information that we receive, I would expect some sort of per ton fee increase. So all of these things we're going to come back with more information and communicate certainly with the entire CAAAC as well as any subgroup of stakeholders that may be more directly affected by that. There's another area that we collect fees from, and that is from our open burning program. We've got roughly 11 major burners. Primarily the Forest Service conducts a lot of that burning, as well as maybe Montana DNRC, and there are some other private facilities. That program, we have not raised fees in that program for a long time. That is an area where we're also looking at the probability of increasing fees, and they're charged on a per ton basis, increasing fees across those roughly 10 to 12 major burners. A lot of that will depend also upon the information we get in terms of their emissions from those dozen facilities, and then we would collect the appropriate fee to collect the appropriate revenue to run that program. The last item that I wanted to talk about is something that you may recall is last year, 2 years ago, when we sought a fee increase from the industry folks that we regulate. We did not seek an increase in the portable facilities. That is a flat fee based on the number of permits that a certain company may have. The idea there was we're developing a new registration program. We knew that it would be revenue neutral. That is, we're developing a program that can be implemented with the existing revenue stream, but we knew that we needed a different fee structure. So Troy Burrows and Julie Merkel are taking the lead. They're working with some of those facilities, and I think their meeting is next week, correct? Monday, the 16th, I believe that is, to start talking about the fee structure for us to regulate those portable facilities that are now registered. So we can keep our costs low, we can do a much better job, in protecting air quality, but we do need a revenue stream to support that. The idea there is that would be revenue neutral, and historically we've collected roughly between $275,000 and $300,000 from that industry. We're still going to target that $300,000 range, but depending on the structure, some facilities may see a fee increase, some may stay the same, and some may go down. So I didn't want to characterize this as revenue neutral doesn't always mean that fees don't increase or fees stay the same. So again, the increases that I'm talking about is just to get it out early so that we can start setting up some of those stakeholder discussions like we did a couple years ago, where we can come and bring the information that we have with the staffing levels and our target revenue and the efficiencies and all of the things that we have been doing as an Air Quality Bureau over the last decade or so that we're continuing to do. But we also need emission inventories. And yet again, this is about the third year in a row that we have asked folks to please come in early with your emission inventories. We know by rule we can't require them earlier than February 15th, but if you have them earlier than that, give us good information, and please submit that information as early as possible so that we have that data when we come talk to you about the fee increases that we can rely on and feel that it's pretty accurate. Now the timing of this, the reason I'm asking and pushing so hard is our bills go out in November. So November of 2020, bills will be sent out, November 1st. Ahead of that, we need to have time for our computer folks, IT folks, to get in and change the appropriate fee, and we can get the invoices and everything compiled and get them verified and be accurate, right? So ahead of that, we need to have final action from the Board of Environmental Review, which is roughly a 6-month process. So 6 months from October is we're looking at March or April, maybe May at the latest, to initiate rulemaking for fees, which means ahead of that, we got to have a lot of discussions, and ahead of those discussions, we need the data. So I know it's challenging to submit emission inventory data for a calendar year shortly after it ends, But to the extent companies have been compiling that information and maybe only have to add on to it December, that would be very helpful for those conversations. So I think I covered everything that I needed to cover. Other than, before I open it up for questions, I did want to let folks know that we're continuing to look for efficiencies, remove redundancies, both on us and most likely on you as well. If it's on us, it's probably impacting you as well. And that's kind of the basis for the next presentation that Hobie's going to lead, and that's discussion of reporting and, you know, submitting information that maybe we don't ask for, or that we don't need, or in a way that maybe isn't efficiently or concisely provided to us, and Hobie's going to talk through a lot of those things. But whenever we come and ask for fees, all of you have appropriately and consistently asked for a demonstration for us that we're doing our level best to be as efficient as possible, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in all areas of the Bureau. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions. Why don't I go to the phone first and see if there are any questions on the phone before we look to folks in the room. Okay, since Alan didn't have any questions, I guess we should seek a fee increase for the oil and gas registration fees.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead. I'll be back in Helen on Monday and we can talk face to face.
Any questions in the room? All right, more to come. Thank you very much. I'm going to duck out. I've got to get going to Bozeman here pretty quickly. But thank you all very much. I hope you all have a great holiday season.
All right, well, once again, I'm Hobie Rash, and currently I'm the supervisor of our field services section. And before we launch into this, let me just note, if I could, please, we sent out a first email to all of our stationary permitted facilities last week. We call it our heads up email, just to kind of get people's minds going in that direction, as Dave noted. And I will mention to everybody, both in the room and on the phone, we had a couple boo-boos with some email addresses. So if you know of someone who didn't get that email, or it's you, then please let me know. We want to make sure that gets fixed. Our next email, which will get you set up with your login information, etc., for the emission inventory season, we're trying to get out by the end of next week. So if we can fix all of our email address problems before then, that would really be helpful, I think, for you and for us as well. So I'll just, there's a little public service announcement. How about that before we launch into some report thoughts? Also, though, to segue off of what Dave said, and he really set this up, is as we progress on into the future, and this has been true for a couple of years in particular now, but perhaps more so even as we look towards 2020, we are really looking for efficiency gains in the way we do business, and where we can do things not only just more efficiently but better. How can we collectively come to better air quality outcomes? And one of those places we've been looking at quite a bit has been this notion of reporting. And as we'll see in just a moment, we'll talk about some background on this topic. But what I want you to take away, first of all, is what we want today in this presentation to be really is a beginning of a conversation. And hopefully a big and broad conversation between all stakeholders involved in this. This is a significant effort and provides ultimately significant value, I think, if we do it right. And so that's where we want to launch into this. So again, what we're trying to do is kind of kick this off today, talk through it a little bit, introduce it, get everybody's juices flowing a little bit mentally and intellectually, and try to promote some dialogue as we move on into the future on this topic. Okay, so with that as a beginning, then we need to establish a little bit of context. I think this will be helpful as we talk about some other items. So first of all, why in the world do we talk about compliance reporting. I mean, what is that all about? And that seems profoundly intuitive, doesn't it? And pretty darn straightforward. But sometimes I think because this is so complex and it involves so much stuff and so many rules, it's easy to get lost in this. So I just wanted to reiterate this, and this will be helpful as we discuss this on into the rest of this presentation. But really, ultimately, compliance reporting is about documenting and communicating whether you're in or out of compliance. That's the ultimate goal. And yes, with specific rules, specific permit conditions, are you in, are you out? So that's helpful just to keep that as our goal. So this year, in calendar 2019, our agency in the air quality world at least will have received and reviewed somewhere over about 1,400 different reports from our industrial sources. Most of those, as we note here, are from our stationary sources. Some of that, of course, also comes from what we have historically called our portable sources, mostly with respect to stack test reports and protocols, things of that nature. So it's a pretty significant effort. That's a pretty significant effort on everybody's part, on the part of industry, certainly, and on the part of DEQ. So collectively, what we want to do now is say, as we look at those two background components, how are we doing? Efficiently and in terms of benefit to air quality in the state of Montana, how are we doing? And how well are we meeting that purpose collectively? Can we do any better? And I think what we want to propose today and on into the future is we think we can. We think collectively there's some things that we can do to make this process more efficient and more beneficial. So what I'd like to do is just share 4 broad categories of that. Once again, we want to get your thinkers going, and then we can move on from there. So step number 1, and Dave introduced this a little bit, is this concept of there's some stuff you can stop doing. And we want to capitalize that. There's 2 things that I'll mention directly. So most notably, if there are things that are not required in permit and rule, stop sending them to us. You just don't have to do that. So that'll lessen your burden, and that will lessen our engagement as well. So once again, if it's not required, you don't have to send it to us. Now the rest of that equation is this. Do please, however, keep records, and consider keeping them in a form that's digestible and easily reportable. So if we collectively get to a point where we say, wow, we need to know more about something that you didn't report, we're going to say, hey, please can you forward that information to us? But in the first point, if you don't have to, don't do it. Now that's true, I think, in 2 different respects. First of all, sometimes we get whole reports of information that's not required of you. And so you don't have to do that, okay? Sometimes that comes in the form of, for instance, old ambient air monitoring requirements. Not necessary to report some of that anymore, so if it's not, again, don't do it. Keep it, but don't submit it. I'll use kind of a Montana adage for our colleagues in North Dakota. It works over there just as well. How many times have you heard, when it's blizzarding outside, if you don't have to travel, don't. And that fits here. If you don't have to report it, just don't. And that will help everybody quite a bit and make our process more efficient. The second place where this is true is in reports that are required, but that also contain information, though, that's not required. So sometimes I call this like our aspirin issue. So I'm old enough where my doctor requires me to take a little aspirin every single day for my circulatory system, right? And so it's easy to think, you know what, if one small aspirin is beneficial to me, maybe it'd be a little better if I took 2. And honestly, if that helps, then maybe it'd be beneficial if I took a whole handful. So the target is this big, so what I think I might do is shoot this much, sorry on the phone, you can't see my hands working, to make sure I get all that covered. So I'm going to over-report a little bit to try and make sure I get everything and I don't miss anything. Well, like in my aspirin analogy, if you would take that with you, you know immediately that 1 aspirin for me helps my health But a whole handful of aspirin for me is toxic to my body, right? And that's kind of the message I'd like you to take away with you. More is not necessarily better. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help us, and ultimately it doesn't help the state of Montana. So once again, even in individual reports that are required, find those things that you are being asked to report and report those things. All the other stuff, once again, keep it, have it available. If we need more information, if we get into discussions or have a problem, then we can talk together about supplying that information and discussing it in more detail. So that's number one. Stop. You don't have to do that, okay? The second topic we'd like to discuss is this notion of summarizing. So once again, this really speaks to our purpose in reporting. Where are you in compliance and where are you out of compliance? So in most cases, what we're believing and where we'd like to go together is right up front, just say so. Summarize that. And we're looking at processes even in your annual certifications where that might be possible there as well. Here's the things we did right. All these conditions were in business, right? Then here's places where we had issues, and we can deal with those directly. So summarize whenever you can. That's really helpful, I think, to us. I'll use an example, maybe a poor one, but some of you have encountered this, like for a stack test report. So there are certain components that we really, really need. Now, what we don't want you to do is just say, hey, we tested one day and everything's fine. Well, that's obviously not enough. But find those data points that are really significant. So while compliance reporting is not just a data dump, certainly it does include pertinent data. So in the example of a stack test, let's say for an asphalt plant, you need to say, here's what we tested at in the right units. Here's what our permit limit was, and we're in or out. You're going to need a couple more data points beyond that, right? We did the right test for the right length of time. And if it's an asphalt plant, here was the production rate. Pretty important. How much more do we really need? Let's consider together probably not too much for that initial determination. Once again, though, I'll throw this back at you, but keep it. Keep it so that if we do need more information, we can ask you for it. Most of the time for stack test reports, that's just about enough to get us going. So that's the concept. Summarize information wherever you can. Pull it together. State very clearly. We think we're in here. We think we're out here. Provide whatever data is necessary to validate and back up those conclusions. But beyond that, hang on to your information, and we can dialogue about that in the future. Okay? So number one, stop doing some stuff. Number two, summarize wherever possible. The third one is kind of similar to those things. So that concept is consolidate. So especially if you're a significant facility, I mean really, really big, and you have tons of reporting requirements, you encountered maybe regularly this dynamic where you might have 2 or 3 different rule or permit requirements that are asking for very similar information. But because they come from different places, different rule, maybe from a MAC, maybe from an NSPS, maybe then from a different condition in your permit, you're feeling like you have to generate 3 different reports, individual reports, let's say. So what we're saying here is you don't have to do that, and especially if the information is similar or identical in each of these. Submit one report to us, consolidate those together, do the same thing, here's where we're in, here's where we're out, and simply say in the header of that report, this is intended to comply with this condition 1, this condition 2, this condition 3, or whatever it is. You might find that beneficial even in reports that are of different topics, but maybe on the same frequency. So if you've got 4 or 5 different quarterly reports, for example, you may be able to consolidate those down, crispen those up a bunch, make your life easier in reporting, make our life easier in reviewing, make that whole process more efficient. And so that's the concept here in consolidate. Here we go again. Make sure you keep your stuff. One of the things we do, and the reason I keep reiterating that, is a place where we're trying to move, and hopefully we're going to get there more and more over time, is potentially less focus on stuff that you have to send us and more time as we interact with you on site. So one of the goals of the agency for a couple of years now has been an increased field presence, which to us means more time interacting with you at your location. So we're going to want to look at some of your information when we show up. We've always done that, but this is a way we can allow you just to keep that information on site. You don't have to send it. You don't have to compile it necessarily. Just make it available when we come to do a look. So that should help you out as well. So once again, keep your stuff. So finally, here's number 4, and that is communicate. So perhaps you have for years already been thinking, man, I wish we could just report like this. We would really love to hear what you have to say. Maybe you're thinking at this moment, wow, that all sounds really good, but my permit requires this of me. We'd still love to hear that. And we have been discussing, are there permit modifications that we can make appropriately to make the reporting process easier, more straightforward, more efficient? We're talking about that. If that's true for you or an industry you represent, we would really like to hear about that. That's important to us. How can we move forward so that this works better for everybody? I'll just add this because it's true for all of us in all areas of our life. You might be thinking right now, you know what, we've been doing it this way for a long, long time. And so far it seems like it's really been working, for the past decade or however long you've been doing this. We collectively need to do better. We need to make some changes that make this process, again, more efficient and have more air quality benefit for the state of Montana. So collectively, that's what we want to do together. Here's a place where I'm going to throw you a little curve, though. In this case, with respect to communication, don't keep it to yourself. Okay, we'd love to hear from you. We really would. Dialogue with your compliance inspector. If you have somebody who you work with regularly, talk about that. Those are the folks that are looking at your reports. Find ways to make this work better for you and for them in the review. Talk to Julie in the permitting section. Talk to me personally. I'd love to talk to you about this. Let's discuss any possibility to make this work better. So with that, any questions that we can address right now, or you want to just think about it, feel free to get a hold of us later on.
This is Joe with Exxon, Joe Lero. So one thing I did not hear in any of that was electronic reporting. And I don't know if you can address that. I know I bring this up every couple of years to whoever wants to listen, and it seems like we don't get very far. And, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained. And I know, like, at least at our site, I know other sites are the same as trying to go paperless. And I know one of the sticky issues is always the signature, the wet signature page. But, seems like we can overcome that. We could go a long ways with electronic reporting and submitting things via email and whatnot. So if you can address that at all today, that'd be great. If not, maybe the near future.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That actually was, as I anticipated this, that was kind of my number 5, and I held off with it. But what I wanted to say, and I will now, is if you and your corporate and your legal folks are comfortable with sending us electronic files, do so right now. We have some companies who do via our file transfer service. So if you want to PDF your stuff and send it to us, that's the first step in that electronic reporting regimen, Joe, that you're, I think, referring to. Now, would we like to go beyond that? Yeah, we absolutely would. And one of the places, not in the stationary world, that we're sticking our toe into that water, and hopefully we'll find more and more of that, is in our new portables program, where portable registration will occur directly over the web. There won't be any paper at all. So we really are trying to engage in that. But until that day, if you're at a place where you're ready just to PDF and send us PDFs, that would help us, and that would gain us some more efficiency. So right now what happens, every piece of paper anybody sends us, we scan. So our admin has to work on it. And then forward that, and then forward that. So usually it gets forwarded to me and then to our compliance inspector. So it's pretty laborious. We could save a lot of work. So could you, I think, if you're comfortable doing that.
Well, I'll just add, like, for us, we send everything electronic to the billings DEQ office and all the paper stuff here, which the difference is just one more email address instead of a whole paper file. But I've been under the impression that you guys have to have in your records the official signature page, on paper, not transmitted over a PDF. So if we're jumping over that hurdle, sounds like we maybe are. I'm not 100% sure.
I think we are. The balance, though, that I would toss back to you is the comfort of your legal folks in that commitment. Are they okay with submitting it electronically? Again, some companies are. Another way to handle that is send the report document to us electronically. Send a copy, the original page with the wet signature in paper. Send one piece of paper rather than 200 or 300. So, and that once again is something I think we can dialogue about and find a sweet spot for everybody.
Well, appreciate hearing that. So we'll keep in discussion, and because we'd like just send everything electronic and just get away from paper completely.
We would too.
Where we can. Which is probably 99% of it. And can't speak for other companies, but I'd imagine they're probably in the same boat.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, us too. So, and I'll just to beat that to death, all of our records are electronic now. We don't save any paper. So we do have to scan. Whenever you send us a piece of paper, we scan it and file it electronically, and then your paper gets shredded. So why don't we skip that step?
So I'll just add to that, because I think Debbie, was it just this morning that you asked?
Yeah. Actually, yesterday.
Oh, okay. It's all blurring together. No, so sorry, this is Julie Merkel for those on the phone. We're just having a hard time getting buy-off from the powers above us about the electronic signature, and it seems crazy because there's electronic signatures in everything we do in our world these days. But until they give us their blessing, I guess I would ask that you send the cover page only via hard copy, which doesn't make sense because then we're going to scan it in and destroy the signature. But just for now, and we'll keep working on it and we'll try to get there, but everything else electronic is perfect. It just serves us better. Go ahead.
So this is Debbie from Bison. So one other question. We work with several of the facilities and billings that have the Billings Laurel SO2 SIP and stipulation, and those requirements are pretty darn prescriptive about what's required. And in a lot of cases, I think for a lot of those requirements, they've been subsumed or superseded by other things. Is this an opportunity to get rid of some of that or to move forward on it? I think not speaking, I'll just speak generally that I think there would be some interest there from some of those facilities.
And I'd say that, yeah, we've been talking about that as well. As long as we capture it in the TRD of the permit action so that, when personnel change over or when somebody does a records request and wants to know what's going on, that it's clear what happened and where did those conditions go. But yeah, I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
Kind of an illustration of that, Deb, too, is I think in the STIP it requires some submission of data via either magnetic media or optical disc. And I think where we're trying to go is to say, interpretively, certainly that was top technology back in the day when the STIP came about. I think where we're headed, and I'm not going to tell you this is our final conclusion right now, and I think everybody's legal folks need to weigh into this ultimately, but submitting an electronic file via the file transfer service is still an electronic submittal, even though you don't have a 3 1/4 inch floppy disk, right? So I think there might be interpretive places where we can still get to a good spot with some of this, and where we can't, those are those spots where let's talk about potential permit modifications or some documentation of here's how we need to work with this on into the future. We've talked to Liz, who is our planning supervisor, as you know. Is it time maybe to revisit STIP-SIP, things like that? So obviously that's not going to happen this afternoon. So can we get there? Is there a way to manage this appropriately so we don't violate anybody's legal commitments, yours or ours, but still make this a way better process? And it looks like there may be.
One more hiccup that still sits there is receipt going through the FTP. When we take it to the post office, we get a postmark saying that it was sent. With the FTP, I'm not aware that we keep something on our side that says that we met the obligation of getting it to you. Now, readability and understandability, that's different, but some sort of receipt needs to come from the FTP system.
So thank you for that input, and that is something we've considered as well. And I think we're fully aware and really open to the reality that that return receipt certification, that yes, we did actually receive that paper document. You get something back in the mail, you can put in your file, and it pretty much ends all argument as to whether or not you submitted that information. And so I think we're sensitive to that. We've discussed that and talked to our IT folks, for example. Is there a way to just modify a little bit the file transfer site so it can generate something back to you that you can keep in email form that says the same thing? I'm going to ask you again, this is a place where some dialogue would be valuable. If that return receipt through the post office is the only thing that satisfies you, then over time we're not going to probably ultimately be able to do that forever. But in the near term, are there things that would fulfill that same need that you have for some confirmation that we did in fact receive your report electronically? So let's talk about that some more. Let's see what we can do internally. I don't know if just one of us sending you an email would get you the same thing. And if that's the case, that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. It doesn't require any IT modifications to our file transfer service. So that's certainly something I think we'd entertain.
I think I would feel a lot more comfortable if it was automatic receipt, so that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm submitting it, and then if I'm not getting something, then I've got to run to the post office and make a paper copy so that I know that it went that day. So
okay, thank you. Sure. I mean, if you're up against your deadline, right, to get your reporting done, then an email 2 or 3 days later probably won't help you. But yeah.
Right. That causes sleepless nights.
Yeah, we already have too many of those, don't we? So let's see if we can make those go away a little bit.
Sure. Thank you.
Last call for questions before we move on then? All right, thank you very much.
All right, so this is Liz Ulrich again. We've talked a lot about redesignations in previous meetings, and I just wanted to give you guys an update because we have been working on them. They're time consuming. It's been a couple, there's a couple of people on the team that have done a really good work, but I just wanted to give you a status update. You can see the ones that are in white have been, are off to EPA. And then the ones in blue down at the bottom, that's Libby PM 2.5, Butte PM 10, Whitefish PM 10. Those three are all being worked on, and honestly, they're waiting for me to review them and send them to the governor's office, right? So I'll take responsibility. They are pretty much done. Whitefish is still being worked on. That one got a little bit complicated. Instead of a limited maintenance plan, we're doing a full maintenance plan on it. But it's also really close to being done, and it would be great to have that. I don't know. I'm thinking like within 3 months, that one might be off to EPA, with the including the 30-day comment period for SIP submittals. So, and then the last two that we're saving are Thompson Falls PM10, and that one again is looking like it might be a full maintenance plan. So that's why that one was kind of pushed down. And then the Laurel SO2 non-attainment area, and that one is just going to be a lot more complicated for us, and so that's why it just kind of moved down to the bottom of our list. We're saving the hardest one for last, and hopefully we've learned quite a bit in our dialogue with EPA on those first ones that will be a little bit of a smoother process for us. Maybe. Fingers crossed on that one. But again, we hope to have those done in 2020. For sure, Thompson Falls, and hopefully the SO2 in Laurel will be done, if not in process, if not done. So, and again, there's, some of those reasons. You guys are in the room and on the phone understand why this is kind of a big deal for us. These areas have been around for a long time. Legacy PM10 non-attainment areas weren't doing anybody much good. The areas have been attaining the standard for years. So we're just trying to loosen that burden and get these off the books. So is there any questions on that? This is just a quick update for you.
This is Hal from Bison. Just what makes the Laurel SO2 so complicated? Is it the new standard or something? Or
not the standard, but if you look at all these sources or all of these areas, they don't have sources. That really is the overwhelming reason why that one's going to be more complicated, is that it has an emitting source still. That's the biggest deal. All of these other ones were older. They were either, wood products, they were road dust. That was the reason for a lot of them. We've got a Sarco and East Helena. Either the sources aren't there, or they were area sources that have been taken care of, road paving.
It just seems to me that, the CHS is quite well controlled.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm hoping that it's not as complicated as we might think it's going to be.
All right, just curious, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll be working on it.
What areas remain in Montana beyond this list?
This is it.
No other non-attainment areas?
So there are a couple of tribal non-attainment areas. One is around the Lame Deer area, and the other one I think is up around the Flathead area, around the Polson area. And those are both tribal, and we don't have any control over those ones. So this is our list. The blue ones are the ones that are still, and again, submitted to EPA doesn't mean they've acted on it, but we have worked with them extensively. So there shouldn't be any surprises when they go to approve these.
Do you know what the processing time is? I remember what it used to be, and it was a really long time. So what is EPA looking at as far as 18 months?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any questions on the phone? All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is this meeting on? So, hi, my name is Rhonda Payne. I'm in the permitting services section in the Air Quality Bureau, and as you all might have heard, Rebecca Harbage has accepted a new position in our department and was the project manager for the Regional Haze Project, and I've stepped in to be in that role now. I have to apologize to the folks in the room. I was a few minutes late. It's actually kind of not the greatest thing, but I was in a slight car accident on my way over here, and I didn't have my phone to mention it to anybody, and I thought, oh gosh, isn't this just my luck that, my first time going to CAAAC and this happened. So nonetheless, I think I've calmed down enough. It was not a big deal. It was just a little fender bender, but still kind of one of those like, oh, darn it. And of course, this happens today. So I'll be doing the Regional Haze update for everybody today. And I just press this one, right? Okay. So the last time we met was back in February of 2019. So a lot has gone on since then. And I kind of want to just review it all for everybody, just to sort of give a reminder of where we were back then, what we were, kind of the messaging we were giving you all. One thing we were looking at was the monitoring data analysis that we had conducted for Montana. And if you recall, that's where we were talking about the old versus the new method. So the 20% haziest days that was in the first rule versus now, well, I shouldn't say the first rule, but the rule has now been revised to update that metric for measuring visibility at Class 1 areas. We now have a 20% most impaired days metric. I think we've spoken a lot about that with you all. And just to give a quick graphic here, this is what this means. Here in Glacier National Park, this is on the old method. You can still see that we're picking up a large organic carbon signature there. This we obviously know is from wildfire impacts. But what that looks like in the new method it does a fairly good job of trying to scrub out those extreme episodic events such as wildfire, dust storms, etc. You can see the carbon signature is much lower, and instead you're really seeing the ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate components rising up, or at least becoming more prevalent at our monitors. So that left us with this conclusion that SO2 and NOx are the primary pollutants of concern at our monitors, impacting our monitors. And we kind of gave you guys a bit of an update. I'm going to switch out a mic. Thank you. Okay, so back to where I was. So this slide is taken directly out of that last presentation we gave to you all, and I apologize to those on the phone that might be following along with the copy of this presentation, just the PDF copy. I realize that copy does have all of the animations in it, and so it probably looks a little bit jumbled on the slide page, and I'll get that cleaned up and reposted so that you can actually see what's on the page. But this is what we had done. We conducted our preliminary source screening, populated the list of emission reduction strategies, performed our 4-factor analysis, and then we were intending on selecting our reasonable control strategies. And where did that leave us? Well, as you all know, we were looking very closely at all of our sources, and we just our entire universe, our data, 271 permitted stationary sources, over 1,200 registered oil and gas, and then the yellow are the remaining portable sources. And I think the last time we met, we also had more of a conceptual slide that we were discussing about our Q over D approach, and this time I want to kind of give you guys some more information, the actual data of how we came about to the sources that we selected. So we first, knowing that NOx and SO2 are the primary emissions present at our Class 1 areas, we went to the 271 permitted stationary sources. We took an average of the emissions from all those sources because we wanted to make sure we were getting a more representative sampling of, we didn't want to just have a snapshot year that might not be too representative of normal operations. So we took that, we looked at what our NOx amount was and our SO2, and combined we have, as you can see, over 40,000 tons per year of NOx. This is just from our emissions inventory data. So we took that 271 sources and we screened out all the facilities that had an average annual emissions of NOx and SO2 less than 100. That left us with the facilities representing 95% of the total 2014 to 2017 NOx plus SO2, and you can see the breakdown of the pollutants there. That left us with 24 sources that we then also took into consideration the whole D part of that Q over D. We're looking at the distance to the nearest Class 1 area, and that left us with 15 sources, although I'll definitely say here we weren't just looking at the 24 to get to 15. We also picked up a couple of additional sources that didn't quite meet the 100 ton per year threshold for the emissions, but were very, very close to a Class 1 area. So their Q over D brought them into the screening analysis. So that's where we landed with 17 sources. And now here's a list of those sources. You can kind of see where we drew our line right at 4 and get an idea of what was screened in, what their emissions are or were, the nearest class 1 area. And in the end, we got to 90% of the total NOx and SO2 represented by these 17 sources alone. When we were looking at this analysis to begin with, we were following draft guidance from EPA that was recommending that we get at least 80% of all the emission sources in our state screened in. That guidance is now finalized, and it was finalized, I think, in September. It no longer makes mention of this 80% really in the guidance. However, a lot of states, that started out the screening process followed that draft guidance, and so this is where a lot of states landed as well with their breakdown of sources. Here's a listing of where those sources are located, and you can see there is one source very near to the Medicine Lake area that didn't reach that 100 ton per year threshold, but is very close to that class 1 area, so it's included in this round. So what did we do with all that stuff, that list? Well, we evaluated those 17 sources, determined that 9 of them should be considered for additional NOx and SO2 controls, 1 for only SO2, and the remaining 7 for just NOx. And we contacted the people, the facilities, and introduced ourselves, introduced our process, what we're going to be doing for regional haze, what we were looking at. And then we also contacted them and said we had used this average annual emissions of the 2014 to 2017, but if sources did not feel that that was representative of their actual operations, we let them kind of use their discretion on what they would prefer to use. So some sources, by the time this analysis had been done, had obviously submitted their 2018 emissions inventory data, and we could, some sources prefer to use a 2017, 2018 average. So that was certainly an option in some cases. We were able to work with sources on an individual basis for that. And we also kind of just confirmed their current level of control, just so we understood what was happening at the source. And we went through some sources had, I guess, the luck or the added benefit of going through the first round. So they had already conducted some of this analysis, whether it be through a BART analysis or reasonable progress analysis in the first round. We said, hey, by all means, if it makes sense for you guys to go ahead and use that analysis as your framework or your foundation for this round, that's absolutely fine. So some sources did that. Some other sources that were new to our program kind of needed a little bit more of a primer or a prepper on what they were supposed to be producing. So we coached them and kind of said it's just like a backed analysis in some cases. And once you run through your backed analysis, you'll be able to take that control and run it through on the very bottom here, number 4, the 4-factor analysis for potential controls. And that's a statutory analysis that's required in the regional haze rule. And now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go more into what our requirements are for developing our regional haze SIP to be turned into EPA. These are taken out of the EPA guidance. It kind of prepares all the states to say, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be working on? And I know that was of interest to some people to kind of understand where we are in our process. So we have already conducted our step 1, which I already described to you all. I might refer to some notes here. So this is where we're identifying the 20% most impaired days and the 20% clearest days, determining our baseline, our current and natural visibility conditions at each class 1 area. Step 2, we have a rough idea, just using a Q over D approach, of what sources in Montana might be impacting sources outside of our state. We're also waiting for the modeling that will be conducted at the regional level, the source apportionment modeling. That'll give us more information on how we're going to address any kind of out-of-state impacts, both us being upwind and us being downwind from other states. And really, The source selection, that's what we just discussed. And step 4 is the 4-factor analysis that sources have submitted to us. And we're really kind of in the thick of all of this right now. And I sort of purposefully offset the box a little bit to include a little bit of step 3 in there, because there is a potential that we're going to be going back and looking at oil and gas sources, area sources, and the like, and considering those as part of our source screening as well. We haven't done that just yet, but that's in our plan for 2020. The step 5, the select and control measures for reasonable progress, that's really where we're in the thick of things. And we're considering all the 4-factor analyses that were submitted to us, but we're also considering an additional 5 factors that are in rule, and that this is all part of going to be our control strategies for the second implementation period. So we're considering 4 factors, excuse me, but we're also considering any kind of other emission reductions from ongoing pollution programs. We're also considering source retirement and replacement schedules. This is a bit nuanced, but measuring and mitigating any impacts of construction activities. That's an option that we can be reviewing. Of course, here in Montana, we have a smoke management program, so that'll be part of our plan and our strategy this round. And then the anticipated net effect, this is just directly from the rule, on visibility due to projected changes in point area and mobile source emissions over the period. So that would be obviously anything that we know would be happening to either the point area or mobile source emissions that would be we could be taking credit for. The glide path, this is where we're going to be demonstrating that we will have an improvement on the 20% most impaired days, and that no degradation on the 20% clearest days is occurring, and that's compared to the 2000 to 2004 baseline. So that's that check, and we also do that. There's a step 7A and step 7B, and step 7B is the glide path check for other states. And then the additional sort of catch-all step, this is where we make sure that we've documented all of our consultations with the FLMs and tribes and other states, as well as our embedded progress report. Now here I want to go a little bit into more of the modeling efforts that are occurring at the regional level. And I know a lot of the sources that were screened in for 4-factor analyses have worked very closely with us to provide certain data points that we need to be able to then give to our regional partners for modeling. And I've taken this schematic because I think it kind of sets it up nicely. At least for me, a visual really helps to kind of see where all this stuff is coming in and how we're going to be using it. So this is just the glide path for the most impaired days there at Yellowstone. And you can see that we started out, the baseline was 8.3 deciviews. The green line represents our baseline period, the 5-year average from 2000 to 2004. Then we have another 5-year average, 2014 to 2018. We have our natural conditions in 2064 and the EPA uniform rate of progress. And this information is all housed, conducted by the improved monitoring, and will be, and actually is available on a, it's called the TSS site, and it's a site that is housed through Sierra, Colorado State University, and this is where all the material that a lot of the consultants and the like are kind of putting all of the data for states to be able to look at and use for their own analyses. So then we have our KMX modeling that's going to be coming, and we provided them so far with our 2014 NEI data. They're using that as the shakeout modeling run to test the model, make sure the model performance is up to snuff, if you will. And then we've also fed to the modelers our blue line, which is a modeled baseline. This is the representative baseline that we worked with sources on to say, what do you think is most representative of your operations in this period? So we've provided those emissions inputs to the modelers as well. 2028 on the books, and I'll ignore the fires part for a moment. please. So the 2028 on the books on the way, that basically is a modeling run that says if business as usual was to occur in 2028 and no adjustments were made, where would that put us on the glide path? So that is a run that's being, states have provided the inputs to the modelers, and it's in process right now. Lastly, we have the purple, the 2028 controls. And this is one where this is going to be where we're going to say, okay, what would be the outcome if we had a % reduction in NOx, SO2, or PM, whatever pollutants we were looking at. Each state is obviously different. And where does that land us on the glide path? Now this, I'm going to try to briefly touch on this idea of the 2028 on the books with wildfire and with prescribed fire. These are modeling scenarios that will provide us with, they will be our source apportionment models, so that they'll provide us with the results we'll need to do that step 2, which is the determining how we're affecting other class 1 areas. But there are also, interestingly, there's been a lot of I suppose need for this across the region, that we try to evaluate the impacts of wildfire and prescribed fire on visibility. So the way I understand it is that those scenarios will kind of adjust, maybe increase wildfire, increase prescribed fire from the baseline, which was held constant in all of the other modeling runs. And this will provide states with just a little bit more information of how fire is impacting visibility, because it's obviously still an issue. Even with the new metric, we still see some amount of wildfire signature, the organic carbon signature. So that's that. And I realize this is an extremely busy slide. I don't intend you all to sit here and try to read everything on it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sorry.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear on a couple of things. Well, let me ask it this way. There's one that shows let's say the 2028 on the books with fires. Is that a model that's been run?
It's in the process of being run currently.
Okay, dumb question. So why is up there? You just mean it in your graph to show that it's being done on that year?
Correct. Yeah.
That's not related to the vertical axis.
Correct. Yeah. No, it's not. That's right.
Okay, go ahead and move on, because I'm curious about, I guess they haven't run them yet. I'm curious about what the model runs are showing at Glacier and Yellowstone based on current number, okay, and the projected 2028 on the book stuff. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Because I was confused, I couldn't understand.
Yeah,
Wow,
I should say
you already
this
got
is
it, so
all
what's
sort of like
what's
a
the deal?
cartoon, you
Okay.
know?
All right, I got it, thank you.
No problem. And this might speak a little bit more to your question here. So in this bottom block, all that text, that's really our state planning and SIP development effort that we've been conducting over the course of 2019. I grabbed this slide from a previous presentation that I think was given perhaps to the refineries. So this kind of outlined where we were intending to be in 2019, and comparing that also with what's occurring at the regional level with all the technical analyses that are happening. So that's my okay, ignore all that stuff, we've done it. And we've provided the necessary inputs to create those, modeling efforts. We are currently in this green section here, which is that step 7 on the other slide, discussing control strategies with the source FLM and EPA, documenting any reasonable emission reduction measures, and submitting our control strategies to the RAP for modeling. So that's where we are. We are delayed a little bit in that effort, just simply because of the modeling at the regional level is taking a little bit longer than anticipated. That's why I've tried to kind of offset that red box, which then of course delays this run, and the last one, which is really the meat and potatoes of this, is conducting and evaluating the 2028 control scenario modeling. We are anticipating that will be done and the results will be in our hot little hands in the spring. So that'll be very important for us. One thing I also want to call your attention to is this is assuming that we have that we're going to be submitting to EPA by the early summer of 2021. As you all probably are aware, Montana is really trying hard to get our submittal in by the end of 2020. We would really like Governor Bullock to be the person that signs our SIP, and then we can submit to EPA thereafter. So we have a very busy 2020 with some external factors that we're hoping will kind of come through for all of us. But we need to be able to finish these last few steps and squeeze them into 2020. So more to come on that, obviously. Do you have any questions about that, or? That's no problem.
I am wondering about, I guess, how is the four-factor analysis coming along in terms of, I mean, I realize it plays into all that we talked about, but
right.
Is the result, everyone I believe has submitted their four-factor analysis. You
That's
are
correct,
looking
yeah.
at it. Is there any status as to a decision? Or are you waiting more for model results before you?
Unfortunately, we really are kind of just waiting for those modeling results to inform us a little bit more, because of course those modeling results include not just the permitted stationary sources, but all the other sources of emissions in Montana. So the mobile emissions, fire, area sources, etc. And we want to be able to have a full picture of what's happening before we really make any decisions on the four-factor analyses. But we are in receipt of all 17, and I've had some questions about being able to post those onto the web, and I'm thinking that that's fine. So we'll try to make those available for everybody to review as well. I just want to touch on this brief sort of philosophy, if you will, about the regional haze and rule. If you know, at least the planning effort here is that we're really just trying to make incremental progress in each of these planning periods. So, you know, we started out, had our strategy the first 10 years. We'll have a strategy the second round. Each additional 10-year chunk, we're hoping to make progress, obviously, towards natural conditions. So this is really about making incremental progress. And the last concept I want to end with is something that we have all found, us, the team, have found kind of interesting. These slides are taken directly from EPA, from the modeling that they conducted and released to us all, also in the early fall, I believe, in September. There is a part in the rule that allows states to adjust for international contributions. So there would be uncontrollable anthropogenic sources from other nations. And of course, in Montana, that is a big thing for us because we are bordering Canada, and there are some very large, we discovered this in our progress report, there are very large sources just north of our border that are impacting Class 1 areas here. So how do we deal with it? Well, as you can see, the schematic is kind of showing you really can just adjust your URP depending on the amount of that amount in the gray that represents international emissions. And the results of the modeling were kind of interesting, and we're definitely looking at this as a region. What this is showing you is, excuse me, the 2028 visibility impairment, and the circles are obviously there. The larger the circle, the greater amount of haze or visibility impairment at those sites, and you can kind of see the what is impacting at those sites. So still, we see that haze is a problem in the east, and it's mostly caused by U.S. anthropogenic sources. In the west, we have a lot of natural scattering. There is some prescribed fire, and you can start to see this blue, which is the international anthropogenic component. And in this last slide, this is saying, and what portion of that international component is from Canada, from Mexico. We also have what's called boundary conditions. Those are emissions that are coming in from outside of the modeling domain, so it would be from India, China. You can really see those emissions are hammering up on the west coast. And you can't help but notice that at least EPA in their results have found that Montana and North Dakota are greatly impacted by Canadian emissions. So this is something that we are absolutely working on and looking into, seeing how we can incorporate this idea into our more, our regional modeling, because that's the modeling that we'll be using for our SIP, further SIP development. Will be the model that comes from Ramble. So. And I think that's all I have. I'll go first to the phone for any questions. And I guess hearing none. Any questions here in the room?
I guess it's fair to
this
say
is Alan.
you see yourself as pretty much on schedule.
Yes, yes, we are absolutely trying. That's something that,
So I'm
you know.
not being critical. I just,
No,
I
not
just
at
don't
all,
wanna
not at
know
all.
Where things are, that's all.
No, no, certainly not. And I've heard this many times, and I always feel it bears repeating that, especially in these regional efforts, you can only go as fast as the slowest state. And Montana is really in the lead, and we're excited that we're in the lead, but obviously we're kind of waiting for some of our other states to provide the necessary inputs.
I have one other silly question.
Sure.
Where is the improved monitoring station at Glacier?
Oh,
Physically, is it-
Craig might know this question. It's right by the gate. Yeah. Yeah, and that is a curious.
Well, I've always wondered about that, because
we-
I assume that'd be the case, because there's a lot of cars there.
And we
NOx
see the
emissions
highest
and-
ozone impacts at that
Right.
station
That's
in Montana.
correct, too. Yes, it's a very interesting, Glacier's
That's
interesting.
trivia, whenever.
Yeah.
Air quality trivia.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but maybe Hal would just ask this, but can you paint a little bit of a picture of what the next year might look like, or a year to 2 years? I know you've kind of touched on it, but from the operator's point of view, it'd just be kind of nice to be able to see what that picture looks
Oh,
like.
certainly. Yeah, thank you. So I think what we've discussed as a team is really that, or at least the way that I feel like it is going to look, pretty much everything that we've asked from sources to be submitted to us has been submitted. I'm not seeing that we're going to require any other additional work on any four-factor analysis, redo or anything like that. Of course, we will be talking to sources once we determine what our control strategy will be for 2028. That would be a point where we'll be engaging with you all. But in terms of any additional work that we might be looking to engage with industry on, I believe that would be it. Really, I think from here, it's us developing our SIP, writing the SIP, making sure we have a robust demonstration of what our plan is going to be, if that answers.
Yeah, so for those facilities that do have to put in additional controls, is that going to be, do you think that the SIP will take precedent and that will come from the DEQ, or is it going to be driven from EPA?
It'll
still?
be from the DEQ.
DEQ.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're definitely after June, July of 2021.
Correct.
So is there some action later 2021 possibly, or when is that timeline that response will be out?
Certainly. Well, and this is something that we were actually just talking about in our team meeting yesterday, about the fact that in the first round, I think the controls were required to be installed and completed within 5 years of the finalization. This round, they say anytime before 2028 will be at the compliance when we need to show that we've had those controls installed. So although we might have a decision in our heads of what it's going to be, and we'll have that enforceable condition in our, long-term strategy, the actual installation of those do not need to occur until 2028.
And then 2028, does that start the next round, or when's
Correct.
the next round?
Unless there's a rule change. We don't know.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think that's it for Regional Haze.
And then,
Hey, Rhonda,
and that's it for our meeting. So is there any additional questions out there that you guys are wondering about, or would like to hear more about in the future? Well, you can always,
This is
do
Abby
you want
Krebsbach.
to click to the next one? You can just go ahead and email us, email me or anybody that was in the room that presented, and hope you have a good Christmas, good holidays, and we'll see you again first quarter of next year. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes.